Welcome to this week's edition of The Scots in Us. I'm Camilla Hellman, and I'm delighted that we're going to be able to bring you an update on Pittencrieff Park in Dunfermline. During Tartan Week, we were joined by the CEO of the Dunfermline Carnegie Trust, Gillian Taylor. We were hosted during the week for a wonderful illustrated talk by Gillian and reception by the Carnegie Corporation of New York. And during that time, Gillian gave us even more insight into the wonderful world of Andrew Carnegie from his earliest days in Dunfermline and how he never forgot Scotland, never forgot Dunfermline and all he did. And so now let's look back at a conversation I had a few weeks ago with Gillian on Pittencrieff Park and all that is going on there and how you can become involved.
Good morning and welcome this week to this edition of The Scots in Us. We're going to turn our attention to Pittencrieff, to Dunfermline, and I'm delighted that we're able to be joined by Gillian Taylor, who is going to tell us all about what is going on at Pittencrieff. Gillian is the CEO of the Dunfermline Carnegie Trust. And so, Gillian, without more ado, how are you?
Good morning, Camilla. I'm very well, thank you.
And I wondered if, before we can speak about Pittencrieff, which is such a wonderful project, and we're very proud to be playing a small role in it, if you could tell us and set the scene about Andrew Carnegie, the man who, though he left and moved to the United States as a young boy, never forgot Dunfermline, never forgot Scotland, never forgot his roots. And so let's hear from you a little bit more about that side of things first.
Yes, of course. Well, I'm based here in Dunfermline in Scotland, and Andrew Carnegie was born here. He was born in 1835 to a weaving family in the town. Now the family fell on hard times, really. There wasn't a big lot of desire for handloom weaving at that time. So they emigrated to America when Andrew Carnegie was just 12 years old. So he did leave his hometown here in Scotland when he was 12, but never ever forgot it. The family went off to America for a better life, and they settled in Pittsburgh. And young Andrew didn't go to school after that. His education ended at that time. But he was a very clever boy, and he started working in a cotton mill. And then he started working as a telegram boy, training himself on Morse code. And he became a self-educated man, borrowing books from private libraries, eventually working on the railroads. And when he was working on the railroads, he realized that there was a real need for steel. So he started investing into steel and built up a huge steel empire in Pittsburgh. And that's really how he made his vast fortune. So when he sold his steel empire, he became the richest man in the world at that time. But he's a very Scottish man, Scottish roots and Scottish morals, and he had a belief ever since he was a young man that a man who dies rich dies disgraced. That was his motto. So he spent the remainder of his life, the last sort of 30 years of his life, giving away this vast fortune on a variety of projects and ideas close to his heart. So he's probably best well known for founding public libraries, because education was so important to him. But he also funded universities and colleges. He funded science and research. He also was a pacifist, and he funded peace and democracy as well. So he's a really interesting character. And he certainly didn't forget his Scottish roots. He was so proud of his hometown of Dunfermline, and he came back to Scotland often. He had a holiday house in the Scottish Highlands called Skibo, but he came back to his hometown of Dunfermline often and left an endowment for the people of his hometown. And with that endowment, we still carry on the work that he does, that he wanted us to do here. And he asked us to spread sweetness and light. That's what he asked us to do. So it was all about the people that lived here and improving their life and quality of life here.
But he also, amongst all these large projects he did, as you say, the support of the soul of a person, and when they're not maybe having a lot in their lives, being able to hear wonderful music. So I love the fact that of all the organs he put into the churches in the United States, but also back in Scotland and the UK, and also the libraries, of course, because everybody should be able to have a book. Because he was quite naughty as a child, wasn't he? He was quite rebellious about different things. And that, in fact, is how Pittencrieff came to be in his sights as something for the people.
Yes, he was an active child, I think, and a very inquisitive child.
Better.
Yeah, maybe inquisitive more than naughty. Yes, absolutely. His family were well known in the town as well. You know, they were striving to improve things in the quality of life for people here. And yes, Pittencrieff, Andrew was born in a little cottage on the outskirts of Pittencrieff estate. It was a private estate at that time. And his cottage, his family's cottage, was based just outside the gates. And Andrew used to peer through the gates into this wonderful estate and gaze in wonder. And he really wanted that to be his playground. He thought it was such a beautiful place. So he used to climb over the gates and then get chased out by the gamekeeper. So he took great delight when he made his fortune in coming back to Dunfermline and actually buying that private estate and gifting it to the people of Dunfermline. And Pittencrieff today is a public recreational park, and that's what our project is doing just now.
Well, and it's a wonderful park. I mean, it's 85 acres, I think, isn't it?
Yes, it's just over 80.
Yeah, there's a glen, there's a waterfall, and then there's this wonderful house that can be transformed. It's halfway there into a wonderful centre. Could you tell us a little bit about the house?
Yes, so at the heart of the park, there is Pittencrieff houses, the former laird's house off the park, and it's a beautiful 16th century building. It has a strong historical link in there. There's several families connected to that house who also went to America. So, for example, General Forbes, who named Pittsburgh, he was born and brought up in Pittencrieff House. And there's strong connections because the park sits next to Dunfermline Abbey and Palace. Dunfermline used to be the ancient capital of Scotland, so there's strong royal connections, and there's also connections to Robert the Bruce, who is buried in the abbey next to the park, and William Wallace, who also spent time in the park. So there's several families involved in the house as well. And the house has been lying empty for a few years now, but it has got huge potential. So what we're wanting to do is to reopen and repurpose the house as a visitor experience centre, which tells these wonderful stories of all the families and the history of this beautiful park, but also use the house for weddings and events and exhibitions. It's a lovely space to do that. And so that's what we're planning to do through this project.
The park is used every day of the year by so many people, and you already have a very lovely restaurant and a playground, and you do festivals there. You do a festival in September. You've just finished one, haven't you?
Yes, the park is wonderful. It's got great outdoor and indoor spaces. And as you say, it's got a lovely setting. It looks over onto the Forth Road bridges, the bridges that go into Edinburgh, and it has the wonderful Abbey, Dunfermline Abbey and Palace as part of the vista as well. So yes, we do lots of activities. It's an all year round park. It's not a seasonal park. We do lots of activities and events there, but there's opportunity to do even more. Dunfermline has recently been granted city status by the late Queen Elizabeth. So what we're finding is that we're now becoming a destination, a tourist destination for people to come, and there's lots of people who want to come and find out about our history and our heritage and the beautiful things that we have here. So the park plays a really important part in that because it sits right at the city centre, and it links into the heritage quarter, and it's a local park for local people to love and enjoy and exercise. But it's also a park for tourists and international visitors, and we're really keen to encourage other people to come and enjoy our park as much as we do.
I think something that people don't always understand, because, you know, especially in America, driving 3 hours is nothing for us. And I remember when I was showing someone the distance on the map, but to ask them how far they thought Glasgow to Edinburgh was, and they said 3-4 hours, thinking of a US map. And I said, no, 40 minutes. And that's a wonderful thing, is that actually Dunfermline is very close to Edinburgh and can take you on this wonderful trajectory up the East Coast, and then be a wonderful base for which you could go up to Dundee or explore further up from there. I mean, I think it's such a great way to bring people to the eastern side of Scotland. They go so much to the west and to the islands that side, and it's lovely. It's so beautiful.
Yes, you're absolutely right, Camilla. There's lots to do in the east side of Scotland. I mean, Edinburgh is obviously our capital, but as you say, we're so close to Edinburgh. We're 30 minutes on the train from Edinburgh, and we're actually only a 20-minute drive from Edinburgh Airport. So the location of Dunfermline is really, really good. We're based in the Kingdom of Fife, which is just over the Forth from Edinburgh, on the east coast. Fife's probably best known for St Andrews, the home of golf, and so we're very close to St Andrews. We're close to Dundee, so Dunfermline is a great stop off if you're doing an East Coast tour of Scotland, and there is so much to see here. It's a really interesting place, lots of history and heritage, and beautiful spaces to visit.
And people can visit Andrew Carnegie's birthplace, which is fascinating.
They absolutely can. So the little cottage that I was talking about earlier, where Andrew was brought up, really in poverty, the family lived in one room upstairs and the weaving went on downstairs. So the cottage was actually bought by Andrew Carnegie's wife, Louise, as a surprise present for his 60th birthday. And so it was then handed over to the Carnegie Dunfermline Trust, and we run it as a museum. And there's a large Art Deco museum hall was added on in the 1920s to the museum. But the museum's a fascinating insight into the life of Andrew Carnegie, and people can see what humble beginnings he really started in to then become the richest man in the world. But also the museum also tells the story of philanthropy and the joy of giving, and how Andrew Carnegie has really encouraged modern day philanthropists to think about their money, and if they've made a lot of money, how they can use that for the greater greater good. And so it's an inspiration to modern day philanthropists. And we still do honour through our Carnegie family of institutions. We still do honour modern day philanthropists through Carnegie Medals of Philanthropy as well. And the museum really does tell the story about all these ideas that Andrew had for how he wanted his money to be spent and how they're still carrying on today, whether it's through as you say, libraries or through the Peace Palace in The Hague in the Netherlands or through the Carnegie institutions that are in the States or Carnegie Hall in New York. I mean, there's so many different things that Andrew was interested in, that inquisitive mind, and so he left these legacies for us to carry on his work, which we do today.
Well, I'm so grateful to have had this chance to talk with you and discuss and be able to share with everybody a little bit more about this wonderful project, which we're just beginning to share over here. I feel there's so many ways for those who have direct connections, whether they be Morrisons, Bruces, Forbes or Wallaces, to become involved, but for everybody too, because Andrew Carnegie touches the lives of all of us in so many ways. And this is wonderful if we can help to bring Pittencrieff House through to the next stage of its life, because that is what you're doing. And congratulations, Gillian. Thank you for all you're doing and for sharing it with us today.
Yeah, thank you, Camilla. Yes, you're absolutely right. This Andrew Carnegie gifted this park 120 years ago, and it's a wonderful park, but we really want to shape the next 100 years because we think it's such an important gift. He always described it as his most soul-satisfying gift of everything he did, which says a lot for, the amount of money that Andrew Carnegie gave away and the gifts he did. So we're really keen for our American friends to help us shape the next chapter as well. And that's why we're really pleased to be working with you so that we can get that input from our friends in the States to help us shape the next 100 years of this wonderful park.
Well, we're going to try to do our best.
Okay.
Very best wishes to you. Thank you.
You too, Camilla. Thanks.